now. So today I'm joined with Rob Healy, who's very kindly agreed to have a quick chat. Rob, thanks for joining.
Oh, pleasure. Delighted to be here.
So I've tons of questions for you. You've been in all sorts of industries from engine. Let me just see if I can get this right: engineering, simulation, software, antivirus, e-commerce, telecoms, banking, fleet management, deep sea exploration, domain registries, insurance, fintech, and government.
Some of those deeper than others, and yeah, but yes, it's been a fantastic time.
You must have a very curious mind, do you?
Yes, yes. So like, and no. So what I do, I keep things really simple, Ronan. So I'm really interested in general, but what I bring it back to engineering principles. So thinking about work and how work works, and trying to find the commonality with all of that. So I am no expert in deep sea at all, and equally some of the other sectors I would have limited to no knowledge on. But when I'm talking to experts within that sector, I'm listening to how their work works and then solve their problems. That's
I
what I
love it.
do.
It's one of the things that obviously a lot of people will come to me about because they're trying to understand the transferable nature of their skills and how they go from one industry to another. Your background's very interesting because you seem to have been able to go seamlessly between those industries. What do you find has been the biggest benefit, or what do you find has been the biggest skill that has allowed you to do that?
So I was super lucky in my career that when I started off, so when I finished up with college, I started initially as a researcher looking into fluid mechanics around the heart. And from that, I got asked to join a heart charity for a year by a fabulous guy called Neil, who brought me into work for Cree for a year. And I took a year out and did that. And I had a ball. In doing so, that shifted me away from pure engineering, which was my training, into dealing with people, which was kind of outside my comfort zone a significant amount. While I was there to keep my feet in the water, I kept volunteering for CFD Online, which was a wiki, which was massive back in the day, and got a job opportunity in the UK. And to answer your question, the huge opportunity there happened after a few months in the UK, where the company I was working for, they heard that their competitor had gone to a type of development of software called Agile. And so we were working for, like, one of my first tasks was to design a testing standard for the nuclear industry for this engineering simulation software. So we knew our software is perfect, or really, really good, I suppose is the correct way.
Mm.
But the competitor was now delivering faster. And
Well,
so I got asked then, possibly because I was a new guy, and possibly because I was not afraid to stick my hand up and get involved, to be on their pioneering agile team, taking it from a 2-year waterfall development cycle to 3 months. And we were able to do that. From that experience, then I was able to bring that through, and it has become my whole career, helping other companies going on that journey to understand again how you can take a process that might have a huge long timeline and break it into smaller chunks and deliver faster.
yeah,
And so,
fantastic, fantastic. That kind of encapsulates your both how you work, but also your approach to work as well. I think, right?
yeah. So I like to work in iterations and get feedback. Sometimes the feedback can be brutal,
Yeah.
but you take it on the chin and you learn. And so it's that learning kind of always learning, always improving.
What's it like when you're going into the teams and you're trying to take them from a waterfall to an agile approach? Is there a lot of resistance there? Are people open and excited about the change?
And
Um,
also, it's very much cultural. So some teams that you go into and they're just ready for change. They're, the fire has been lit effectively. Whatever they're doing, they don't like it. It's not working for them. They're kind of upset with it all. You walk into that ground and they're completely ready. There's other, so that I would call them almost greenfield sites. There's other companies that you walk into that have tried iterative software development before. I worked for one company and I was told by the CIO the day before I started, he said, under no circumstance are you to use the word Scrum. It is a taboo word here because we've tried it. It failed miserably. And so that's not what you're here for. You're here to talk about lean software development. And if you have to bring in the kind of the processes or any of the theory from Scrum, don't mention it to the guys. It won't resonate with them. And so you kind of have to find where people are at, and understand their comfort level. I had a funny crew where I was working with the civil service one time running, and the company I was working for at the time had all their branding for Agile and Lean all showed fitness. So people exercising and running and jumping and climbing. It was cool. But these civil servants had looked up, they were sent on this course. They looked up the website and they landed in with yoga mats.
Right. Okay.
So in their world, so I spent the first half quarter of a day talking about some theory, and then I just stopped and I said, okay, this is not resonating with any of you. You tell me about your work. And so they started to explain to me how their work worked again and how they have to deal with parliamentary questions actually was where a big area.
Oh, really?
So this department, they get an awful lot of parliamentary questions. Everyone has to knuckle down. There's tight timelines that they have to get responses to the minister or whatever for, and they're completely unexpected. In my world, coming from software, that's the same behavior as you'd see with a bug, a showstopper bug. And so now I'm not talking about bugs. I'm not talking about anything from software. We're using the word parliamentary question, but we're using the same techniques and how to visualize that work, how to coordinate, how to deliver it, and how to get it back in a timely fashion, and how to measure against it. And
Very good. So you can get that connection straight away that, this
well,
bug translates to different terminology over here, but
straight away is very kind, but yes, that's what you're looking for. So you like every single organization. I'm convinced that groups of people build language so that you can create an in-group and an out-group, because every single organization I've ever worked with has had a tendency to have 3-letter acronyms, TLAs, and so in Symantec back in the day, they talked about NISNAV and N360 for the Norton suite of products. But when you land in as a new hire, you haven't a clue what anyone is talking about because they just speak in this language that's unique to the organization.
Right.
But I suspect that's what people do. So yeah, I'm here in Kildare. When people talk about the village, they're talking about a shopping centre versus the town, which is
yes.
the town centre. So
Yeah.
like people in Kildare know what they're talking about when they say
So their
that.
village versus the town centre in
Yeah,
Kildare.
exactly. And if anyone from outside says to you, do you also you live in Kildare village? It's the
Yeah.
instant indicator that you don't know what you're talking about.
You're in the out group,
You're in
basically.
the out group.
You're in
Exactly.
the out group.
And so that's what an awful lot of what I try and do is listen for those terms and try to translate them and try to get up to speed with the individual languages, and then take whatever the approaches are and make it make sense in their word.
Very
So
good.
rather than, just dropping down the cargo cult approach, it makes no sense.
Yeah. It's interesting because you've got like the engineering background, and it seems like you're heavily focused on the academics when when I look at your career history and your background. But when you speak about your work, it's heavily people focused, and it seems to me you're taking quite a facilitator, almost a coaching approach to dealing with those groups.
Yeah, absolutely. So like at the end of the day, you've got to get work done through people. Now, everyone thinks that AI is going to take and eat the world, maybe, but at the heel of the reel, there's still going to be 8 billion people wake up the next morning and have to be fed, right? And
Yeah.
have to go. And so, it's working with the people. Sometimes said people, and I'll name no name, can drive you berserk, but a lot of the time they're funny, they're interesting, they're entertaining, and you can learn so much. So I bring engineering skills and systems thinking, but I bring it back to people, and so that's how I approach the world.
Very good, very good. Like, if you were giving any advice to people who are interested in change management or influencing stakeholders, because obviously a huge topic. Every single interview is about like, how do you influence stakeholders? How do you manage conflict? How do you impact change? Do you have any sort of guiding principles that you follow, whether it be taking a phased approach or achieving buy-in or any of those types of things?
Yeah, so like what I would suggest to anyone that's looking into changing behaviors and stuff is to go get yourself a copy of Economics and sit down and read it cover to cover, right? And so uh, getting into that behavioral science side of the house and understanding how people think and how to influence that, that's absolutely critical.
Mm.
Within our world, then, like my world, in lean in particular, they talk about fetching a burning platform. So you've got Kotler's 8 levels of change, and we're trying to build that initial. Here's the big why, Simon Sinek's idea. Here's why to do it. If you don't really have a good handle on that, you're not going to make any difference at all.
So does the why relate back to then because we want to have this business outcome, like we want to be more efficient, we want to make more money, or is it more like this connects with our company values, which we have all actually sat down and agreed upon, which is, let's say, environmental sustainability or impact for customers, or is it both or something else?
It's even more than that, Ronan. It depends on the individual that you're dealing with.
Okay.
So like if you're dealing with the business owner or a CEO or a senior manager there, you're dealing with numbers. Like, and making sure that whatever the big business goals that you're doing with are dealing with are make sense to them. If you've not brought them on board, and I've seen this, that uh, going in and building beautiful agile walls and visual radiators and all the rest of it, and you have a CEO who walks in and goes, "What is that mess on my walls?" Down, it's gone,
Right.
all
Yeah.
gone straight away. But equally, if you're not brought the junior guy who's sitting there in a team and made why this is necessary for this person, like they're just in with the company and brought them on board, they can equally sit at the back of a room texting away and influencing badly a meeting because
Mm.
they don't get it, they don't know why they're there, and they start to just misbehave effectively
Mm. So you get
because
this
they're.
active disengagement, and you get the dissenter who influences the rest of the group.
And then it becomes like a rotten apple. So in that, everyone is thinking, okay, that's the new guy. Fair enough. There was nothing in there for them and whatnot. But it starts by that guy going on, and if it starts to persist, then other people go, well, I don't need to engage in this process at all either. There might be nothing in it for me. And look, I'll just go do what I know what to do, and
Mm.
let all these. This is all for somebody else, and so it's listening and understanding why each individual, what's in it for them. An awful lot of the time in Ali, my good friends, the co-founders there, we always talked about what's in it for me. And it's not necessarily a selfish kind of side of things. It's just remembering that you got to look after the individuals first. And if you're bringing that along and have an idea, you don't need to know. I don't need to go around the room and go, exactly why are you here? But if you've an idea of what are the big themes that we're trying to do and making that extremely clear, then you've got a far better chance of being successful.
Mm.
Do you
It
know?
makes
And
sense. Make it interesting for them. Allow them to have some skin in the game,
yes,
some
yes,
accountability, some, I suppose, agency that, oh, I have actually made some impact on these decisions here, some ownership of it, really.
correct. And if you've taken, say, only a CEO, CFO's perspective on finance, and we're making the business bigger, the guys who are sitting in the individual teams are just going, I'm not seeing that in my paycheck. And we don't necessarily get a bonus out of this.
It's
And I
more
don't,
work for me. Why
yeah,
am I gonna do
why,
this?
why, why am I doing this? Equally, if you only focus on the individuals doing the work, like in a team or whatever, then the senior people go, what am I to do here? Do I have no, am I redundant in this process? I'm not going to be redundant in this process. And so
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
you know,
I'll make my voice known otherwise, right?
yeah, and
Yeah,
suddenly
yeah.
you're in a whole ocean of pain,
Yeah.
because you've missed on one of those big things.
Do you think it's fascinating to listen to you the way you think about these processes? Because I think change is one of the big things that a lot of organizations struggle with, a lot of growing pains or reducing pains. If you're thinking about like the top leader, um, the CEO, the founder, whoever it might be, is it a case of we need their buy-in? We absolutely need their buy-in for any change to happen, or is it a case of if we get enough data and other people working towards the solution, we can convince them over time, and then they will buy in?
Well, I'm a big fan of Klaus Leopold's work, and he talks about the flight levels. So
Okay.
the levels within the organization. So the level one is the people doing the work, the level two is the coordination, and the level three is strategic. So again, going back to lean, that connects directly to the X matrix and the Hoshin approach. And so it's still holistic. You have to look at all the different. So the CEO absolutely couldn't give a damn. Well, actually, some CEOs really do, but most CEOs won't give a damn what any like a piece of code is doing or how it's written or how a method is structured, right? But an engineer really might care about that. The engineer is completely disconnected from the business, the markets, those kind of stuff, but you have to join up the dots through for the business to make sense and to keep growing and moving in the right direction. To drive the change, then it has to be that you're doing that. So Hoshin Kanri is you bring it from strategic down and then back up again. And so it's back to the old story of the lady that was working in NASA. And what are you doing here? The lady who's cleaning the floors. I'm putting a man on the moon.
Yeah.
So it's if you know what the organization is doing, and then there's an understanding all the way back up and down, is really
Okay.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a great one. So it really is focusing on that holistic approach and getting everyone involved. Otherwise, there can be difficulty there. I'm
yeah.
fascinated about how this kind of maybe links into your current doctorate. I say current because the amount of education you do, I kind of feel you might be doing another one anytime in the future. But
No, no, no,
no,
no.
your other half has told you against that. Has
Yeah, yeah. Child number four now, so
okay,
it's I'll be taking my time. Like I really enjoy learning and meeting people and bringing this stuff. The doctors was a really interesting approach to things. It was built out of necessity. So we were working with really impressive organizations in Dublin, like world class, just extraordinary places, and they were bringing agile and lean thinking to the limits. And they were saying to me, we're seeing something here that we don't understand. It shouldn't be behaving the way that it is. And like we went through it, I was methodical and working with them. And absolutely, you're doing that's exactly what the theory says to do. And this is what you're doing. And yes, that's a significant issue. What was happening for those guys running was the backlogs of work. So they were limiting the work in progress. And in theory, that should maximize the throughput, the amount of work that you're delivering. That's the theory. And they couldn't understand why it wasn't behaving like that for them. So what I did was I went and I started to do some research just myself to go right into, behind that theory and into the maths of it and start to go, this is, they're using queuing theory and it should behave like this. Um, it should behave in this way, but these are the fundamental assumptions. And I don't know if those assumptions are holding, that the
mm,
system is stable fundamentally. So what my boss at the time said we would do, so in consulting, there's always a temptation to just go and build a model and sell the model, right? That's the job a lot of the time. He said, well, we're going to take a step back here. This sounds really important. We're going to make a real difference. And so we went off and researched some university partners that could help us understand this more. And we hit on University of Limerick, and I got some phenomenal supervisors there. Professor Fitzgerald from Lero, Professor Conboy from University of Galway, and Dr. Day, who's based out in Carnegie Mellon. And what we're researching then is we started to do the maths around it, and we took a huge number of systems. So we're now, I think, nearly 2,000 systems odd. Now, when I say system, I mean teams plus technology plus, and it can be teams of teams, and looked at the flows of work through them and saw that based on these queuing maths, that the fundamental assumption that agile systems are inherently stable is wrong 76% of the time.
Wow. Oh my
And
God.
that's bad. So like there's an awful lot. And so anyone who's just putting a whip limit on work is all you're doing is you're creating an artificial bottleneck. And a lot of the time within the agile community, so we're still working off that, but a lot of the time we're still working off words that Fred Brooks wrote in 1975, that adding people to a late project only serves to make it later. But Brooks himself, 2 sentences down, says, but this is only true when the system is at its capacity.
Right.
So he knew himself, but everyone is taking this, and then you combine it with Jeff Bezos's 2 pizza teams.
Yeah.
And the whole software development world is working off 2 pizza team where you don't add in people into a late project because you might only serve to make it later. And you start to build up tons and tons and tons of work. And so start to build backlogs that are growing at ferocious speed. So that was what we did.
Could I ask you, Rob, would you have do you have any like super simple examples that, let's say someone who's not au fait with the area would be able to like get a sense of, just when you're talking about that work in progress?
Yeah. So
And
like,
creating artificial backlogs.
yeah. So like if you think about a Scrum team, there's a certain number of pieces of work. Henrik Nyberg has the beautiful Agile in a nutshell. For anyone who's not used to it, Google it. It's the best video that will introduce you to this. So imagine you've got a team and you've got work is coming into them, right? So that they're building a new website, let's say. They get a series of features that are coming in. Now, those requests can be stories, which are planned pieces of work, or bugs that are coming in because someone who's using it is reporting it. That team is able to do a certain amount, right? That historically, so in the Scrum world, they're probably working off a 2-week sprint. That's the usual in Ireland a lot of the time, but it can be anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks. In any given 2-week period, they can get a certain number of bugs and stories coded, tested, delivered, right? Mm-hmm. In the Kanban world, they don't necessarily work off the iterations. They just say, we've got, let's say, 6 members on the team. We make sure that we've only got 1 piece of work each. And in theory, we should still be able to deliver at a certain speed. The fundamental assumption was just by putting in that limit or that block, you would maximize the amount of work that gets done. However, that's a dodgy assumption. A lot of the time, the teams have a limit that they're able to work at with the technology they have, the automation they have, whatever. And if the work is coming in faster from the outside, from people making new requests or new bugs or whatever, then the team is able to deliver. The system becomes unstable. The backlog grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. If nobody's cleaning it up, if no one's paying attention to this, you're just leaving money on the table, tons of money on the table. And because this is where we're talking about the Fred Brooks's thing, the system might start to feel later that features that were pushed down the backlog by subsequent bugs coming in, and you're going, well, you promised me that feature 3 months ago. What is going on? And you're going, well, I can't add any more people to this system because it'll only make it later.
Right.
Bonkers.
Is that like saying I can't open another door on the airplane because it will take longer to board people, where you're like, of course it won't.
The simplest way to think about it is your local shop. Like the local shop around the corner from my house here, when there's too many people in the queue, they ring a bell and they open up a new till.
Right.
In the software world, we don't open up those new tills. We hold
because of this one line written in a book like
from 1975.
Okay, incredible. Incredible.
And so we don't open up the new tills. It's
So
extremely rare.
Your research dug all the way down to this fundamental
Yes.
misleading assumption. And then what happened?
So the next area, so that was year one that we brought that to the academics' attention, and we're still working on improved models and improving on this. The next area that we looked at is when I presented that. So we have to do, the great thing about the UL scheme is it's structured, so you have to present every year to an
Okay.
international academic board. And so what we had to do is I presented at a forum, and they said to me, "How does this relate to overwork?" And so the data that we had, we could see, now it's on a team basis, Ronan, it's not on an individual basis.
Mm.
We could see where the teams were working late at night and outside core working hours. And so we were able to build a model to show for European based teams. Now it's the company that we took all the data from, we had all their team fundamentally based in Europe, with only one or two outliers. But we got the data there and we looked at how many of these teams were working through the night. Now, overwork is a massive, massive problem. It's massive because it's incredibly dangerous. In Japan, like the karaoke term, it's killing people,
Yeah.
and stuff. But even without that, I was reading numbers from the WHO who announced overwork during the middle of the pandemic as a major issue. They were saying that it's costing about $1 trillion a year in sick days alone from stress-derived overwork.
It's incredible.
So we had the data to go and look at this and to see the speed at which work was flowing through these systems, and then whether they're unstable or stable and growing or not growing. And what we found was there's no direct correlation at all. So it's good and it's bad. It's good that we brought the method, and hopefully others will be able to look at it, look at the individuals, look at what is causing overwork. And it's good to know that basically that people don't pay a huge amount of attention of these growing backlogs,
Wow.
and the speed at which their work is doing. It's bad because we didn't get to whoever solves that problem running, it will be making a huge difference to the world.
Well, the 4-day week is an initiative that seems to be gathering a lot of legs, and like it's interesting if you think of the amount of. I'm very interested in your opinion about this because if you think of our current working week is 35, 40 hours based on factory systems, based on very industrial times when we are using manual labor compared to knowledge based work that you know most of us should maybe be having AI working be alongside as part of our day. Are we still expected to do 40 hours? And if we're doing 60 or 70 hours and we're overworking, how productive and effective are we in that extra time doing knowledge work? Or are we just making mistakes that because we're tired that we're going to have to correct the next day?
What's happening? So when we looked at the 295 systems, in this European company, we didn't find one that wasn't overworking. This company has an official 40-hour week working policy with flexi time. So officially it's 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock. And
Okay, well,
that's where people should be working. There wasn't one out of 295 that people weren't working at some stage till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and Sundays. In the modern knowledge work economy, we have built systems that we can be always on. There's always a mobile phone. It's not hard to get onto the internet. It's not hard to log into work.
is that individual discipline that
Probably.
you think, or is it a culture of, like in any culture, there can be different status symbols. It can be overwork. It can be getting your work done. Like in some cultures, overworking, like in Japan, overworking is like a status symbol. I'm so busy. I'm so important. I have to work a lot. That's what it was when I was there anyway. And then in Finland, as far as I've heard, if you can't get your work done on time, it's like, how come you can't get your work done on time? Are you not productive at work when you're there? It seems to be the status on is the reverse.
But in both things, I think, Ronan, whether you're overt or covert about it, I think it's still going on.
Hmm.
And I think that the fact that it can go on, so like there's this really weird thing with work overall. So like it's whether we want to work or not. So like you look at one side and there's the whole theory X, theory Y of whether people want to
Right.
work or not. And then there's the flip side of that. And we looked at this as part of the research with the Michele paradox of work. And the paradox of work is that when he looks at flow, that state of happiness and getting stuff done, he found it is actually quite common in the workplace. But in every single time they ever investigated it in the workplace, people always reported that they'd rather be somewhere else. So when you get into a state of flow while you're doing your hobbies, you say, I loved it. I was having the best time in the world. I was so happy. Yes, that makes
Yeah.
total sense. Whereas when you find the exact same person in the exact same mental state and you say to them, would you rather have been somewhere else? They go, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so we have this we enjoy work, but we don't like to report that we enjoy work.
Right.
And
Okay.
within the modern workplace where we can work 24 hours a day, some people are really disciplined, are really good, and they pull down the laptop at 5 o'clock and that's it. They're done. They're disconnected.
Mm,
Other people are just junkies. They're just
mm,
coming in and they're going in and going, oh, I've had a brilliant idea. I now know how to solve that problem, or I'll get this last little bit done, or I'll get the email sent, or get whatever done. And that can be really detrimental. I had
yeah.
I'll tell you a super quick story. This is from a friend of mine, but I won't name any names. And she rang me up in the pandemic and she said, I'm having an awful time. Because she managed a whole team of people. And she said, what I like to do on a Friday is get to inbox zero. So get all my emails sent out and whatnot. She said, I have never, ever minded staying late till whatever time it takes to get to inbox zero. So then I have my weekend free. I don't have to think about anything. She said, because of the pandemic and everyone is now logged in from home, I send an email at 10:30 at night. I have a reply at
Oh my
quarter to
God.
11 and I now have to deal with the reply. And so what I had to do with her was teach her I expect she knew, but look, still, I gave her a bit of coaching on that about scheduling her emails. So her emails were now scheduled. So she got the psychological benefit of feeling that she
Yeah.
was done, but they didn't land in anyone's inbox till Monday morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's such an individual thing. So there's a
It,
company cultural thing, but because of the technology that we're now working with, where anyone can be on at any time.
and we've all got the notifications on our smartphone and all that sort of thing. I'm interested in your opinion about what you think is the most effective, though. Is it a 40-hour week? Is it a 4-day week? Is it a 60, 70, 80-hour week?
So there's a really, really great book from a guy called Sussman that I just finished. It was and he talks about the Kellogg's organization in the 1930s. Um, and what they were doing. So there was a company called Kellogg's and Post, I think it was, who were both making cereal in the US from
They made it
1910s.
into a movie. Yeah,
Oh, so you've seen this.
there's a movie on it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. So I won't bore anyone, but the synopsis is they brought it right down to a 30-hour week.
Mm,
And then in the 1950s, the Kellogg staff themselves, independent of management, brought it straight back up and brought it to
nice.
40-hour working week. Because they said that they were tripping up with their partners at home and they weren't enjoying it, and probably they were going to get paid a little bit more. And so I think that there's a lot of benefit from the 40-hour week. I think like the 8-hour day is a sensible approach. And I like the best ever company I ever worked for. And my favorite job, no disrespect to all my other managers who may or may not watch this, but the my the most fun I had was when in Semantic, when we set up a system out of necessity. So they set up this whole Scrum system, and then they took the offcuts effectively rolling, and they put
Mm,
us into. They told us you can just go and figure out these other websites, and we're not going to tell you. We're not going to give you Scrum training and whatnot. And so one of my good friends, Dave Denham, he set up a follow the sun system in one team based out of Singapore and East Asia, us based out of Western Europe, and one team based out of Western America, so California. 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And it was so good because the system never stopped morning, noon, and night from Monday morning, Singapore, all the way through to Saturday, um, like whatever, Friday evening, California. It ran non-stop.
Very good.
But within that system, you could only ever work 8 hours. So you'd
Yeah.
have to be there for handover between Singapore and Dublin and
Right.
California. But if you stayed and worked another hour, we wouldn't be long before someone was pinging you. Why are you still here? Go
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
our work now, and you're done, and
Yeah.
stuff.
I think it
And
makes tons of sense, like, because when you know, like, I don't know if you've ever been, in a coffee shop or a hotel with your laptop and your battery has only got, like, 45 minutes left or something like that. You have to think to yourself, "Okay, what am I actually, gonna do? What's my number 1 priority?" Whereas if it's like, "Well, if I don't get it done in work, sure, I'll go home and I'll hammer out
correct,
a few more emails later, and maybe I'm tired, maybe they don't need to be sent at all, maybe they'll get solved later." And so it's like, how much extra work are we doing that's really not impactful or productive at all?
precisely, precisely. And then when you give it the longer thing, I can do this later on this evening. Suddenly you do all the rest of it, and you log in at 2 o'clock, and then you mess around for another bit, and
It's
suddenly you're burning your sleeping time and
and
wrecking
it's
your
like
sleeping rhythm.
it's kind of, I think, and I've definitely done it myself a bunch of times, but it can like create this lack of discipline where it's just like, well, I won't do it now in work. I'll just do it later, and it will be more or less the same. But it won't, because now you're eating into your free time. You don't get that like mental pause either.
Yeah,
Um, like when people come to me and, as a career coach, and if they're asking, if they're saying that they're working long hours and they're very, very busy, I want to know about their priorities, but I also
yes,
want to know, what are your priorities personally?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
are you like, when you're logging off work, are you going to go for a nice dinner with some friends? Are you going to take the kids to the park? And if those priorities aren't really clear, then I'm wondering, like, are you going are you going to somewhere, or are you just leaving work?
yeah, yeah. And we've all met people in that situation, and they just
You know?
work all the time.
Yeah. And then you can get to the end of a career or a decade, and you're like, yeah, I just extended my work hours the whole time because I wasn't really sure how to fill my personal time.
Yeah.
So I think they're important questions to ask. But that's fascinating. Can I ask you, now, you work currently in a workplace change organization, and all about, you work with culture and stuff. What do you what do you guys do in your own company? Do you work 40, 60, 4 day week, 40,
So
60 hours?
I really like. I think um, there's a guy I really enjoy watching. A guy called Rory Sutherland. He does a
Yes,
lot of
the marketing
marketing
expert.
stuff. Yeah. And I really like where he's coming. That we're possibly having a lot of the wrong conversations. That a
Mm,
lot of the time, particularly, we focus on just more and more money, and the bonus and the promotion schemes is just about more money, but that's a poor way to think about the world. It's just like you were saying, with are we just working ourselves to death? And so maybe the right way to think about it is time as well. So the balance with where I'm with Work Matters. Work Matters has been really, really good to me. So in the last few months, it's been a challenge with just as my partner had a baby, she had a lot of health issues that it was not a straightforward birth. And Work Matters were really, really good in terms of giving back the time, and then like no problem, I'll take the financial hit, and it's great to have the time. Equally, with them, they've been really good that I have time now to finish off my doctorate, keep going with the research, but still drive enough forward. So I'm currently working on a 2-day week with a degree of flexibility for them, and
fantastic.
and keep. I think that that's the right way to, and I see that a lot of people will be looking more and more for that. We see an
Yeah.
awful lot with companies trying to get people back into the office, and there is some benefit in that. But the hybrid and the people who are not at work or not in offices, the huge amount of time that we got back in the pandemic because we didn't have to
Mm.
commute. and more people, I think, will just be looking for time and getting their time back, and
You're
that's
getting
good.
their time back and reducing the commute and focusing on what matters. And it provides, yeah, like in your case, great flexibility for, to deal with personal things that are coming up. What do you think about the famous water cooler conversations that, that idea that it's probably not good enough to email somebody about, or it's just something you thought in the moment, but you forgot to put it into the Slack channel. But if you're at the water cooler, if you're at the coffee machine, you might just say, how come we never do it this way? Um,
Yeah, it's look, there are positives and negatives to people. One time I was in working with a team and they were all co-located, and they had a team charter above the desk. And I came back several weeks after the team charter had all been thing, and they put a new post-it on it saying, "No eating hot fish at the desk." Right? And I started laughing at this, and they said to me, "No, no, Rob, that's the most important post-it on the thing."
wow. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so people are people. There is the serendipity of meeting people and learning from them and stuff is still absolutely beneficial. There is a huge benefit, I think, particularly in the early phases of work, for people who are just getting into the companies, back to learning the language that we were talking about, in being involved, in getting embedded with that. But I think the flip side of that is there always has been. So I was talking to a CEO years ago about remote working during the pandemic, and he said, we were doing this back in the 60s, that when they were doing aerospace design and an engineer needed focus time. This is in the days that there was physical offices, not, hot desking and whatnot in the modern world, that there was still always an expectation that you just picked up, you got your stuff done, and you came back in when it was ready to present. That if you needed that space and time, as long as you weren't, throwing your stuff on the tube or losing it, you could take it, think about it, and bring it back. So,
Mm,
this remote and space to do and to deliver good knowledge work has always really been there
yeah.
in various phases.
It's just more formalized now.
So it's this balance that we have to look at and how to foster it. I know there are companies and some of my friends worked with them that only work in mob programming. So they just dial into calls and they have an artificial, so they're working internationally. They're too disparate and they don't want to. A lot of these guys be quite senior engineers. They don't want to waste time commuting and they don't want to be talking over a cup of coffee, but they still open up a call and they sit down and they have a chat. We
Yeah.
have to build the systems where people can still communicate. The
Yeah.
big area and a lot of what we're doing with Work Matters is looking for those outliers and for the kind of the lost sheep, that are just starting there and making sure that there's a body, that there's mentors, that there is clear communication going on with them so that and I say them, it can be us walking into an organization and you just not know. And the guy that you'd wheel over your chair to and say, actually, how do I log into that system again? It's kind of rebuilding that culture so they can work remotely
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds super interesting. In terms of like work matters and your work with the company Work Matters, could you describe maybe what a day in the life looks like?
Yeah. So with Work Matters now, I've gone in as the director of transformations. So what we're doing is we're working with a whole series of clients, looking at particularly in the HR space and bringing in a lot of agile thinking into that HR space. What There's a lovely lady from Sweden, and her name is Pia Maria Thorin, and she was the first to look at this entire space and realize that what the software development guys had done since the 90s and certainly early 90s of breaking down work and making it an initiative basis, those same software engineers were going through an annual pay review. And she was
Mm,
like, that doesn't make any sense. Why should why is HR working on this really long timeline where the rest of the company is working off really short timelines? Even if it's a public company, even the finance department are working on a quarterly basis while HR
yeah.
are working on an annual basis. And
Annual
she was like,
basis. Yeah.
this doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
so we
Because
do it.
HR set up the policies, right?
Well, this is it. But then within where they own those things, and it's trying to bring it back. Now, an awful lot of the folks in HR are come into HR from a real human perspective and want to be able to deal with people. But because they oftentimes get locked into policy work, locked into other things, they don't get to hang out with the people that they want to as much as they'd like to. And the second thing that happens to an awful lot of HR organizations is they don't do what we've been doing in the agile world for an awful long time. They don't visualize their work. Some of that is for GDPR protection reasons and all the rest of it. A lot of it is just there's no knowledge of that. And so their planned work in a HR perspective, like of what they wanted to do, write a new policy, develop something, put up a job post, all that kind of stuff, gets burned when somebody says, actually, I'm going on maternity leave, or I have sick leave, or I have an employee that's underperforming, and can you help me with this? Or we need a desperate new hire because somebody's
Mm.
handed in their notice. So the planned versus unplanned and how it shifts for them is really challenging. And so to
Right.
bring in the ideas that are well honed at this stage from the software development, the agile world, visualizing work, learning how to coach and treating HR teams as teams, because an awful lot of the time it's like dealing with a bunch of firefighters,
Right.
and actually
It's
that's
the urgent. Yeah.
yeah, and they're not as
Y-
coordinated as firefighters. It's just individuals desperately trying
mm.
to put out a fire.
Right. It's that kind of urgent versus important dilemma that they
Well,
have
a lot,
to work through, I guess.
in their world, like it's all a lot of stuff looks like priority number one, and then
Right.
it's how do you build? It's back to the work that we were talking about. If you are all putting out fires nonstop and you don't realize this, and the only way that you realize it is the jobs are not getting posted, the other work is not getting done, it's getting postponed, postponed, postponed for months and months and months, and with the best will in the world, but because you've not taken a system view of work, you've no idea. You just think that you're some of these guys go in and they're going into a C-suite conversation and they're going, "Why are HR underperforming?"
Mm.
But it's not. It's the fact that they're firefighting nonstop and don't know to look for the more support, build out these tools. And so an
Right.
awful
So
lot of
they
go
spend a
ahead.
huge amount of time sort of, yeah, just firefighting, so they can't have their head up. They're kind of down in the weeds. They can't have their head up looking at the overall strategy, and then maybe, I suppose, reprioritizing a little bit, or asking for more help or another person to be on the team.
It's the same as my research, and this is why I'm in there, because it's the same as a software development team that has just ended up just fixing bugs. They don't have
Mm.
any time to develop new features because they're just so flat out busy fixing bugs and don't know to ask, please, and we need help. We actually need more people or more systems or better systems to help us fix these problems systematically, because
Right, right.
this is where the numbers are.
And what's the response that HR teams are giving you when you go in there and you say, "Hey, we've got some ideas. What do you think?"
Well, like, so I don't want to be giving away too much stuff, but the uh, Work Matters from Kevin MP and James Ryan have been doing it successfully for many years with this stuff.
Fantastic.
They're well respected in this area, and it's again, it's back to some of the cultural change that we were talking about at the very start. An awful lot of HR teams understand because they're in that firefight. And so when they have somebody going in and saying, let's at least understand how your work works and start to talk to you, take an interest in it, not just say, you know, insert expletive HR, that it's actually, okay, look, I understand. Now let's talk about your actual work. There's a very positive reaction to it. There's
Excellent.
always a few that if you're bringing in and you've not done it well, will say that won't work here. And so then it's like we were talking about before, you've got to dial it back. And so let's understand we've not done it well enough yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
brilliant.
So again,
I'm sh
just back to what you're saying, shift in another gear to a degree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure it's super valuable once they give you a chance and they can see the value that you can bring, and they can see that you're there to listen and help and support, and you're on their team as opposed to coming into, let's say, maybe some people might feel like, oh, I'm going to be criticized now, but you're like, no, we're trying to understand and help you. It strikes me as like, that I'm sure you heard that analogy of, sometimes we're too busy driving to the destination to stop and stop for gas, stop for fuel,
Correct.
and sometimes, you know, but of course, we got to stop for fuel, or else we're not going to get there. Super fascinating. If somebody was listening to this conversation and they think, oh, I love people work. That sounds super interesting. I love the idea of helping people change, of coaching them, of working with them. Um, do you think learning those coding principles, um, agile, and agile methodologies, do you think that's a great way to go? Do you think people should focus on their people skills and their coaching? Is it a case of doing a bit of both and then trying to get practice and get in there?
I think from a coaching perspective, I think it's very good to get a handle on at least some of the work that you're coaching towards. I think in what we saw over the last couple of years, where a lot of the agile coaches, there was a huge amount. We were badly impacted in the tech um, recession last year across the agile community. I think there was some, not all, that had very little or no knowledge of the teams and the systems that they were coaching, and that's
Mm,
not a good place to be. And so when I was working as a director, hiring Scrum Masters and product owners, it was so important that you're asking the questions fundamental. I'm not asking to pass a coding exam, but at the same time that you understand what stack the things are doing, what kind of development processes, what kind of um, if they have any DevOps processes, all the way through, so that they can talk at least. And it's back to the communication side of things. If you don't talk the same language as the team that you're trying to coach, you're not going to be able to do it. So if you're interested in working in in the developing world, at least get some experience there. If you're interested in working with people, and there's plenty of scope for people coaching and developing that, again, I would be really encouraging to learn more about people, particularly in behavioral sciences. I think it's a really good way to working, and possibly even a degree of marketing, because a
mm,
lot of that is how to influence without necessarily coercing. Do you know, is how to encourage people along. And so that if anyone is interested in getting into that, I would really be saying, look at this as you're getting more up then through the management chain. Again, it's good to be able to talk intelligently about business and
mm,
some of the business challenges that a CEO may or may not be experiencing. And like a lot of the time, I feel like a useful idiot, because
mm.
I'd be saying things to them and, trying to empathize, and they go, no, no, you're just wrong there, but here's the right thing. And so it doesn't help them, but it just helps me in the next conversation with the
Yeah,
next
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right way,
But it's a great approach to have, right? To be open to learning and to be, I suppose, comfortable asking a question that might come across as stupid just because you don't know all the inside stuff, right?
Sometimes as a facilitator, that is your full job. And
Oh, I'm
you have to stand up in front of a room and go, I'm so sorry here, but I'm going to start on this whiteboard and you're going to tell me I'm an idiot about 20
you gotta
times.
teach me everything. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're gonna tell me everything.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear how you're really getting in, you're empathizing with them, I suppose, emotionally and intellectually, to really understand where they're coming from.
Yes.
Um, and I suppose it's back to that thing that, if people believe you understand their perspective, or if you're listening to them, maybe they're going to be more open then, as opposed to coming in and saying, I've got the answers and I'm the
You know,
external expert and here we go,
yeah.
listen to me.
Yeah. No, I'm a big believer. You know, the Irish phrase, Neil Inrod Mar Shanoli, there's no such thing as an expert. So anyone who
Yes.
tells you that they walk into the room and they say, I'm an expert, probably telling you lies. They quite, it's likely they know an awful lot of stuff, and that's absolutely fair enough. But there's limits. So there's
Yeah.
tons of stuff that I know that I don't know. And in those
Yeah.
parts where the conversation goes into that, I try to sit quietly and not make myself, and let the conversation go on. Other bits that I can contribute to and do. And so it's doing that. I think there's a lot of danger, and I try not to do this in saying, uh, we're consultants, we're here to help. And, they say they're the most scary words in business, right? And so a lot of the times we'll start by listening is how I try and approach it, and just observe how things are happening. And then you're in a better position entirely.
Yeah. Well, what's the issue with "we're here to help"? Is that like, "Oh, we need help," or is
A
it
lot of the times when that happens, you'll get said consultants just coming in and deliver a model and say, if you do
okay?
such and such, which is pure cargo culting, it's if you follow such and such a rules, all will be okay.
Mm.
It may be.
And then, if you probably didn't follow it because it's really hard to follow, and then so,
Yes.
it's not our fault type of thing, and off
Yes.
they go into the sunset, right?
Yeah. It's a problem with your culture, your people, your whatever. It's definitely not our problem, and it's definitely not a problem with the model. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah, but we asked you to solve the problem. Did you
Yes.
understand the problem? Right. So
Yeah.
it's like the leaving cert, the advice that you give to all the kids, and you go, you answer the question that's in front of you, not the
Mm.
question you wished was in front of you. So
Yeah.
and so it's really important to make sure that you go in and listen and get a handle on stuff,
Yeah.
and that way at least then you're talking the right language with everyone, and you're starting to work together on solving the problem.
I
If you
love it.
happen to have the right models, the right data, the right everything, happy days. A lot of the time, your clients are asking, have you seen this before? How
Mm.
are other companies solving this problem? Or, horror of horrors, are we the only company in the world that's suffering from this thing? It's because
It feels
it's
like that.
like, so if they really are terrified that you'll say, unfortunately, I've never encountered this before. This is pretty awful, because they feel really isolated. Oh, how did
Oh,
we mess up
no.
so badly?
Yeah, yeah. Was it
What
something
did
we
we
did?
do
Was
wrong?
it something we said? Oh,
Yeah.
no.
Or does this guy know nothing? Or have we done something so awful that we're out on our own here?
Right, so there's a bit of crying on shoulders then as well.
If you're doing your job well,
Mm.
then you've moved, and you'll often have this that ostensibly they'll say they'd say to us, "Oh, we'd like to do an agile transformation." Not necessarily with this
Mm.
current job, but in other work, I'd be told, or a lean transformation or something along those lines. When you could dial into it, though, somebody pulls you aside and say, "Actually, no, one of my big problems is X, Y, and Z," and
Mm.
so
Mm.
and you're making a real difference when you've moved into that trusted advisor status,
Yeah.
and you have to treat
Yeah.
that with a huge amount of respect.
It's
And,
like it's like what's the problem and what's the real problem underneath,
yes, yeah,
the
yeah, and
presenting problem, right?
correct. What they were too afraid to say to me,
Yeah.
in the first instance, they were not going to say this in front of all those other people.
Mm.
But when they pull you aside and say, actually, he really helped me with this stuff.
Wow. I'm
So
fascinated to listen how deep you go into the root cause analysis, whether it be that individual element of actually, can I talk to you for a second? Uh, uh, and also looking at the data and going deeper and deeper and deeper, and then kind of going, those fundamental assumptions we made may be incorrect, and let's investigate further. And yeah, it turns out they are. So, like, it seems like you're on super deep with those analysis of the people and the technology, and then you're actually able to deliver good solutions based on that.
it will, where it works, absolutely. That's what you try and do. I got to give you a shout out, because it's been many times through the last few years that they've said to me, actually, and I'm not even sure if this role is the right role for me, right? Genuinely, that, and I go,
Okay, okay.
actually, Ronan, there's this guy that I know that's been really good, and you should totally go and talk
Well,
to you.
thanks
I'm
very
not
much.
just well, not just bigging you up, because that, I think it's been a huge advantage just to be able to do that. I did never earn commission or anything for those
Yeah,
things,
I meant to talk to you about that.
but it some of the people, that's what they need. Some of the people, they want education. Some of the people need mediation between different
Mm.
parties. It can be really difficult, or training, or things. in those trusted advice conversations, a lot of stuff can happen, and it's good as a consultant to have use a good toolbox and good services where you can get help. Uh,
100%.
yeah.
100%. I love it. I love it. Rob, it is absolutely fascinating hearing how you have gone from industry to industry, from organization to organization, and then taking on all the education that you have as well. So I absolutely love hearing those stories. Lots of good learnings in there. And I speak to people and I have these ideas in my head, but it's so good to like, I suppose, you're in change so much now and so deep. It's great to just like hit that ball over to you and see how you respond to it. So, yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us
So
today.
absolutely delight. Brilliant. Thanks, Ronan.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.